Now that we're done with conditional statements, we will go ahead to Python functions. So as we have already seen, a function is basically a block of code which helps us to perform a specific task. And we had seen the same example over here. So let's say you had to do some sort of online transaction and you had three options, either to deposit money, withdraw money, or check out the balance. Now for all of these three functions, the number of lines of code would be greater than 1000 or maybe even greater than 1,000,000 lines of code. Now for every time if you want to deposit your cash, you can't just write thousands of lines of code because there would be millions of transactions going on every single day. So that is why what you'll do is you will create one function for deposit, one function for withdrawing money, and one function for checking balance. And whenever you want to deposit money, you'll just click on this function or invoke this function, and tada, you're happily able to do it. Similarly, if you want to withdraw money, you'll invoke the withdraw function. Similarly, if you want to check balance, what you will do is you will invoke the balance function. So it is just one function which has a block of code in it which can be invoked whenever required. Now in Python, you basically have two types of functions. So one is the normal function, and that normal function can be declared like this. So you'll type in def, which stands for definition. So this is the keyword, and you will follow it up with the function name. And inside this, you will give in all of those statements or the block of code which is part of this function. Now you also have something known as a lambda function. So this lambda function is also known as an anonymous function. So this is called as an anonymous function because this does not have a name associated with it. So as you see, so over here, this normal function, it has a name. So you start off by giving def and then you give in the function name. But then when it comes to a lambda function, you'll just type in the keyword lambda and you will follow it up with the arguments which are to be passed to the function. You'll give in a colon and then you'll give in the expression. So another thing to keep in mind is you can give as many arguments as possible for a lambda function, but the expression has to be only one. So let's go to Jupyter Notebook and work with both the normal functions and the lambda functions. So we will go ahead and create a very simple function. So we'll type in def, which is the keyword, and then we will follow it up with the function name, which is hello. Now what this function does is it basically prints hello world. That is pretty much it. So I'll click on run. Now to invoke a function, you would have to give in the name of the function, right? So there is something known as declaring the function and calling the function. So over here we have only declared or defined a function. Now to actually work with the function, we would have to give in the name of the function. So over here we'll give in the name of the function, which is hello. And when I click on it, we see that we get the result, which is hello world, right? So this is how we can create a very simple function. So now that this is done, I will go ahead and see how can we pass parameters inside a function. So again, we'll give in the keyword first, which is def. After that, we will give in the name of the function. So over here, the name of the function is add10, and we are passing in a parameter, which is x. So this could be any arbitrary parameter. Now, this parameter is taken inside this function and we are adding 10 more to this, and then we will return the value. So we are taking x, we are adding 10 to x, and then we'll return the value. So this is the function definition. The difference between this and this is this does not have a parameter and this does not return anything. But when it comes to this function over here, it takes in a single parameter and it also returns a value. So now when we are actually invoking this function, so we have typed add10, so we have given the name of the function and we will pass in a value which is 10. Now this 10 will go inside this. So this is where the body of the function is executed. So 10 plus 10 will become 20. And when you click on run, so let me just run this. Now I'll run this. So we see that we get 20. So this is how we can pass in parameters to the function and also return a value. Right. Now let's look at another simple example. So we have already seen how to check whether a number is even or odd using if-else clause. Now we'll just put in this if-else clause inside a function, right? So now every time if we had to check if the number is even or odd, then we'd have to write these 4 lines of code, right? Instead of writing these 4 lines of code, if we just put it inside a function, then all we have to do is call this function with the name and then pass in any number, and then we'll get the result. So over here I have typed def, which is basically the keyword for the Python function, and then I'll give in the name of the function, which is even odd, and I'll pass in the parameter x. Now inside this I am checking if x%2 is double equal to 0. So when I divide this number by 2, I am checking if the remainder is equal to 0. And if the remainder is actually equal to 0, then I will print the number as even. On the other hand, if the remainder is not equal to 0, then I will print the number as odd. So over here, I am passing in the number 5 inside this function. So when I click on run, I get the result 5 as odd. So it's as simple as that. So these were the normal functions. Now let's go ahead and work with lambda functions over here. So as we have seen, we have to start off by giving the keyword lambda. Now after that, we have to give in the parameter. So over here, we have only one parameter, which is x. And after that, we have to give in the expression. So we are trying to find out the cube of a number. So this is x. Now we'll take in x and we'll multiply x with itself 3 times. So that is x into x into x. And when you do that, you basically get the cube of a number, right? So over here, even though lambda functions do not have a name with them, so what I'm doing is I am basically storing the result in G over here, right? So I am not giving the name to the lambda function, but then I'm just storing the result in a variable with the name G. Now when I use G and I pass in 7 inside this, I get the result 343. So 7 cube is equal to 343. Now let's understand the main function of these lambda operations. Now lambda functions mostly come with the filter function, the map function, and the reduce functions. And these are used in conjunctions with other data structures such as list, tuple, and dictionary. So let's say we actually have a list with us, and then we want to filter out only some specific values out from this list on the basis of a certain condition. So this is where we can use the combination of the filter function and the lambda function. So we have defined this list over here, or we have created this list over here. I've named this list to be li, and these are all of the values inside it. I've got 5, 7, 22, 97, 54, 62, 77, 23, 73, and 61. So these are all the values. Now what I want is, I want only the odd numbers from this list. So to extract only the odd numbers, first I will go ahead and create a lambda function. So as you see, this is my lambda function over here. I will type in lambda and I will follow it up by giving the parameter, which is x. Then I'll give in colon and then I'll give in the expression. So my expression is x%2 should not be equal to 0. This means that when I divide that particular number with 2, I don't want the remainder to be equal to 0. Now this is my lambda function, and I am giving this lambda function as the first parameter inside this filter function. So this filter function takes in 2 parameters. The first parameter is a function, and over here I'm passing a lambda function, and then the second parameter is a list. So I'm repeating it. The filter function takes in 2 parameters. The first parameter is the function or the lambda function with which we are trying out to modify the list, and then the second parameter is the list itself. So I have this filter function and I have passed this lambda function as the first parameter inside this filter function, and then I will give in the second parameter, which is this list itself. Now what this will give me is actually a bunch of values. So let me actually print out the li itself over here. Let me click on run. Right now let me show you what happens if I just run this filter function. I'll just put it over here and I'll click on run. So this is what you basically have. Now let me also use the print function over here. I'll cut this out and I will paste it inside this. So again, it's just a filter object. now that we have this, what I'll do is I will actually pass this inside a list and I will store this in a new list with the name final list. So let me cut this out over here. So I have this result, which is basically the list of filtered values, and these filtered values are numbers which are not divisible by 2, or basically odd numbers, and those odd numbers list are stored in final list and I print it out. And when I print it out, I get this. So you see that all the even numbers are excluded. So 22, 54, 62 are excluded from this final list. So this is how we can combine the filter function and the lambda function. So next up, we are combining the lambda function with the map function. So the map function is used to assign or basically modify all of the elements of the list, right? So you've got this entire list over here, and if you want to modify all the elements of the list, then you can use the map function along with the lambda function. Now again, the map function takes in two parameters. First is any function which modifies the list. Second is the list itself. So again, over here, I am creating this same list over here. Now here, inside the lambda function, what I want to do is I will take in a value and I will multiply that value with 2. So this basically multiplies any number which is passed inside it with 2. Now I will pass in this lambda function inside the map function as the first parameter, and I will pass in this list as the second parameter. So what is happening is this lambda function is applied to each element of the list. So first 5 is passed in, so 5 becomes 5 into 2, 10. Then you have 7, 7 into 2 is 14, 22, so 22 into 2 is 44, right? So this is how all of the elements are multiplied with 2 and they're converted into a list and stored in a new list with the name final list, and we are printing out the values. So 5, when you multiply it with 2, becomes 10, 7 becomes 14, so 97 you have, it becomes 194. So this is how you can work the lambda function with the map function. And then finally we've got the reduce function. This reduce function is a part of the func tools library. So first you would have to reduce this. So you'll type in from func tools import reduce. Now you will again go ahead and create a list. So I'm creating this list. So this reduce function basically gives you a reduced list or a reduced result from a list. Now this takes in two parameters. The first parameter is the lambda function itself and the second parameter is the list. So I will use this reduce function and I'll pass in the first function or the first parameter, which is the lambda function. And what I'm doing over here is this basically takes in two parameters x and y, and I add up x plus y. So this is basically you are adding up all the elements which are present in this list. So initially it will be 5 and 8. Then when you add up 13, it becomes 13 plus 10, it becomes 23. So 23 plus 20 becomes 43. 43 plus 50 becomes 93. And 93 plus 100 becomes 193. Right? And when you click on run, this is what you get. So this is how you can basically work with the reduce function and also the lambda function. So guys, I hope you're very clear with how to work with the normal function where you just given the keyword def and then you follow it up by giving a name to the function. Now on the other hand, if you actually want to work with an anonymous function, then you will use the keyword lambda, follow it up with an argument, and then you will give the expression to perform whatever operation you want to do.